Greetings Terrarians, Khaios here. Today I'm going to be showing you 4 easy techniques to enhance your own adventure maps. But before I do, I wanted to quickly announce that the channel has hit 25,000 subscribers. Thank you all very much for sticking around and helping it grow. I cannot express how much it means to me to have all of you here every single episode, leaving a like and a comment. It has helped the channel grow so much. Thank you. I will be having a subscriber special releasing this weekend, so keep an eye out for that. With how quickly the channel has grown this past summer, I've been curious about how far it will go by the end of the year. So I have a challenge for all of you. Are you capable of getting the channel to the next milestone of 50,000 subscribers before the new year? It's a tough goal to make, but I think you can do it. Now, let's get on to the video. If you wanted to create a one-way door or wall in your adventure map, which could not only prevent players from traveling back in one direction, or it could even prevent enemies from getting to the player while the player is free to proceed forward, all you need is a few actuators, a few tiles, and /war platforms. So what we're going to do is, in the wall, we're going to create our little doorway or wall segment right here, and I'm just using some dynasty wood, but you can use whatever you want. And then to the left of that, we're going to turn on our actuation rod, and we're going to place 3 platforms, and we're going to hammer them each once so that we have this nice slope shape. Now you see, if I walk into them, they kind of force me upwards, but if I walk into them and hold the down button at the same time, I'm actually able to clip through this doorway or this wall entirely, but I can't walk back in the other direction. Now, if we don't want to have to hold down the down button while we do that, all we need to do is actuate those 3 platforms. Now we could just freely walk through this block until we're all of the way through it, and then we won't be able to walk back. You do not need to do this with platforms, however. You can do this with tile. So I'm just going to place some copper plating so that you can see it. And then you're going to hammer these into triangles. But the triangles need to be shaped in this direction against the wall. It won't work in any other shape. And then we're going to actuate it. And then we're able to just freely walk through like we did with the platforms. If you were to do this on the other side, just so you could see how this needs to be oriented, we're going to place the copper plating here, and we're just going to hammer that twice into the triangles, and as you can see, the flat side is flush against the wall that we want to pass through. And then we actuate these, and now we're able to freely walk through on this side, but we can't walk back. Say you're working on an adventure map that incorporates the portal gun, and you want to restrict what surfaces your players can shoot portals onto. There are certain ways that you can prevent them from shooting into any other place within the room. The first trick that you can do is just by taking your hammer and hammering the surfaces that you don't want to be activated with portals. So we could make interesting designs like this, but really any sort of hammering motion will do the trick. So you'll see, now that this surface has been hammered, I'm no longer able to fire anything from the portal gun onto it. Another way that we could actually deal with this sort of problem is by using actuators and blocks. It doesn't matter what blocks you use, but again, if you're going to be using lizard brick, you need to make sure that you have the golem killed. And we're just going to place those blocks with actuators on them using the pressurator, and we're just going to actuate those blocks. Now, the way that portals work, whenever they come into contact with a surface that has an actuated block in front of them, they will not accept the portal. The portal technically takes up a tile space, and so does the actuated block. So since this tile space is already being occupied by the actuated block, and we can pass in front of it, we cannot place a portal on top of it. So that's how we can prevent portals from being placed in rooms in areas that we don't want them to be placed. On the topic of using portal guns within your adventure map, say you've designed a map where the player has completed the room and they're able to exit the room and the door shuts behind them, but you don't want them to re-enter that previous room. You can see if I just place a portal here, I could just enter the other room even though the door has been shut. We want to prevent that from happening for whatever reasons you want in your adventure. This is going to be really simple to do. We just need to use some portal gun stations, some block of your choice, and we need a pressure plate and some wires, and that's it. We're going to start off by creating a platform to work on, and this needs to be 11 wide. It doesn't need to be any bigger or smaller. On one end of it, we're going to place one of the portal gun stations, and we're going to right click on its left side to rotate it until it's facing the center. On the other end, we're going to place down the other portal gun station, and we're going to right click on the bulb on top of it that's currently yellow to change it to blue. In between those, right in the middle, we're going to place 3 blocks so that if we were to fire the portal on this, you could see that it attaches to the surface and we could walk through here. On top of that, we're going to create a T shape and we're going to drop down the end bits just like that. Now you see we're able to fire portals onto this surface. However, if I were to grab my portal gun and shoot a portal right here, I'm unable to enter it. And the reason that is because this area is taking up a 1 block space, and obviously my character is 2 blocks wide, so I will never be able to enter this area even though there's currently a portal placed. You'll see that if I do the same thing with the other side, so if I place this portal and I shoot this color down here, or if I do the same thing with the other portal and shoot a blue one down here, I will be unable to enter this. And that's really all there is to this design. We just need it to shoot portals whenever the door is being shut. So the way we're going to do that is by running any color of wire that you want from the bottom end of these portal gun stations to the pressure plate or whatever will be triggering the teleportation or the room to close. So you'll see now when I enter here, I could place a yellow and a blue portal on the ceiling, but when I walk through here, the door shuts and those portals are removed. And instead they'll be placed off screen in this contraption, but I won't be able to enter that contraption, and basically my portals will be reset and I'll have to reuse them. Say you would like a room within your adventure map to activate a trap defense system whenever you enter it. We could do that by placing a 3-block gap with a pressure plate within it so the player cannot jump over it and they will be forced to trip that pressure plate. However, we do not want to just wire that pressure plate straight up to a timer, which will then be wired straight up to traps, because you'll see that if we hit that pressure plate again, the timer turns off and we could just walk through the room safely, which is not exactly a very secure defense mechanism. So what we need to do is have the room detect whenever you enter it for the first time. One way we could do that is with faulty logic gates. I'm not going to go too much into detail about how this works because I already have a tutorial out on my channel, so I will leave a link to that video in the description below. It's also not the primary point of what I wanted to talk about today, but if we create the faulty logic gate using an AND gate with an on lamp with a faulty lamp on top of it, and then run the pressure plate to the top of that logic gate and run the timer to the bottom of it, and then we grab a third color and just run it from the bottom of this into the middle of this, what we're going to have happen is this logic gate will activate the timer when we first enter it, but it'll also deactivate the logic gate so it cannot be used again. So you'll see it turns gray once I first enter this room, and now the trap is going. And anytime we step on this pressure plate, you'll see the trap continues to go regardless of how many times we step on it. However, this isn't completely foolproof, because if the player simply logs out and then logs back in, you'll see that the pressure plates Not going to activate the trap anymore. The traps are off, the timer is off, and we can no longer use this logic gate. So a way to get around this would be by logging out and then logging back in, which is obviously not ideal. However, there is a device that we can create that will not only detect the first time that you enter a room, but it will detect the first time that you enter a room per play session. Now what that means is I can enter this room and turn on all of these fire traps and then walk through the door multiple times and not turn them off. And if I were to log out and log back in, the room would be off, but when I enter it again, it would reactivate the flame traps. Now this design was created by a friend of mine named Darthkitten. I did not create this design. I just wanted to make sure that all of the credit for it goes to him. I just wanted to show you how it's created, and I did get his permission to do so. And it's also really simple to do. If you're worried about logic gates because they intimidate you, don't worry, you won't be needing them in this design. All we're going to need is a 1-second timer, 2 dart traps, 2 tail pressure pads, a bunch of blocks to build with, a bunch of wires, and we need either to have... And we either need pressure plates or logic player sensors. In this example, I'm just going to show you a logic player sensor just so you can see how big the activation box is. It doesn't restrict us to a small 3 wide entrance to force players to step on a pressure plate. We could actually go all of the way up to 14 between the ceiling and the floor, or in this case the pressure pad, to give us a lot more room to work with. So what we're going to do is place a row of blocks directly over the 1-second timer. And on top of that, we're going to place the 2 teal pressure pads on either side of the timer. The way that teal pressure pads work is they're activated by projectiles, and they're not activated by players or NPCs. From there, we're going to take 50 blocks, and I'm a little shy here, and we're going to run them up the center from in between those 2 teal pressure pads. And then on either side of that, at the very top, we're going to place 2 dart traps, and we're going to hammer them so that they face downwards. And then we're going to close this off on either side. The reason why it's important that we close this mechanism off, and this really only applies to if you're building it on the surface, is that falling stars can trigger this. And so if you don't want any projectile, particularly a falling star, to enter this contraption and turn it on, then you're going to need to have it closed off like this. And then we're going to turn on our actuation device and grab more blocks. They can be the same block if you want. I'm just using a different block here so that we could actually visualize what's going on. And we're going to fill in the tunnel underneath this first pressure pad, and we're going to actuate it. As you can see, actuators have been placed under each one of these blocks, and with them actuated, this entire row is now in the background. We're going to do the same thing on the other side, but we are not going to actuate it. So you'll see here that we have one active row of blocks and one inactive row of blocks. And if I grab another player sensor and just place it right here and run some wire into these dart traps, you'll see that one dart breaks immediately on this tile while the other one passes all of the way through to the bottom. So if I run even more of this red wire up from the door's entrance into these top 2 dart traps, you'll see that whenever I enter the room, a dart will press this teal pressure pad at the very bottom. What we want this teal pressure pad to do is activate the 1-second timer. So we're going to connect those 2 teal pressure pads up to the timer using a different color of wire. And then we're going to connect that timer up to the flame traps, which are currently blue. So you'll see that when I enter this room, the dart will hit this, it'll turn on the timer, and it'll start activating the defenses within the room. However, you'll see that when I enter or exit the room again, it's going to turn that 1-second timer off. So the next step that we need to do is grab yet another color, in this case it's going to be yellow, and run that from the 1 second timer up the actuation blocks on either tunnel. So you'll see that whenever I turn this 1 second timer on, these toggle between active and inactive states. And what that does for us is it destroys darts as they travel down the tunnel so that they cannot reach the pressure pad again. So you'll see if I'm standing down here, I can activate this any number of times and it can fire darts, and you can see them breaking off camera a little bit with the projectiles, but they'll never quite reach the bottom of these pressure pads, so they'll never be able to turn off the 1 second timer, which means that this will remain on indefinitely. And you'll see if I log off, then log back in, the room has been deactivated, the 1 second timer is off, and the tunnels are no longer activating in an alternating pattern. So when I enter the room again, the dart will be able to travel freely to the very bottom, reactivate the 1 second timer, and the room has been activated again. So this is the device that you can create that will detect whenever you're entering a room the first time per play session, which will allow you to log out, log back in, re-enter the room, and reactivate the trap. And that's going to do it for today. If you found this tutorial helpful, be sure to leave a like and a comment, and if you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing to my channel. Not only will it help us reach that goal of 50,000 by the end of the year, but it really does help the channel out. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll catch you all later. Happy building.